The massive space station floated silently among the stars. It looked like a giant crystal palace, reflecting light from 3 distant suns. Inside, the hallways buzzed with activity. Creatures from hundreds of different worlds walked, crawled, and floated through the corridors. Some had fur, others had scales, and some seemed to be made of pure light. This was the Galactic Council Station, and today marked the beginning of the Millennium Summit. The grand dining hall was enormous. Tables stretched in every direction, filled with foods that could be eaten safely by all species. The air hummed, with dozens of languages being translated in real time. Diplomats laughed and talked, making deals and sharing stories. It was supposed to be a celebration of unity. Then Prince Daehyun walked in, and everything stopped. He was impossible to miss, 7 feet tall with black scales that caught the light and turned red. His eyes glowed like melted gold. Heat shimmered around his body, even though he was just standing still. He moved through the hall slowly, his footsteps echoing on the smooth floor. The other diplomats scattered. Some pressed themselves against the walls. Others simply left through the nearest exit. A group of small, insect-like beings tried to move so fast that one tripped and fell. Nobody helped the fallen creature until Daehyun had passed far enough away. Daehyun was used to this. It happened everywhere he went. Fear followed him like his own shadow. Not because of what he had done, but because of what his people were. The Pyrosians, the conquerors, the species that had nearly destroyed 14 others in a war 300 years ago. He found an empty table near the back. Of course it was empty. Any table he approached became empty within seconds. He sat down and looked at the food in front of him. It was bland and colorless, designed to be safe for everyone. Pyrosians needed heat and fire in their food. This tasted like eating air. Around him, conversations slowly started again. But people spoke in whispers now. They kept glancing at him, nervously. "That's the Dragon Prince," someone whispered. "I heard he can melt steel with his breath," another voice said. "His grandfather killed billions, burned entire planets." Daehyun pretended not to hear. He had heard it all before, thousands of times. He was the monster at the party, the weapon wearing royal clothes, the living reminder that some species were predators and others were prey. But tonight, something felt different inside him. He was tired, so deeply tired of being feared, tired of eating alone, tired of seeing people run from him. He stared out the window at the stars and wondered if this would ever change. His father, Emperor Taeyang, would be angry if he knew these thoughts. A Pyrosian prince should never care what weaker species thought. Fear was good. Fear meant respect. Fear meant survival. That was what his father taught him every day. But Daehyun was starting to wonder if his father was wrong. The hall slowly emptied as diplomats left for meetings or rest. Daehyun stayed at his table. He had nowhere else to go. His rooms were cold and empty. His guards stood outside his door, but never talked to him. Even his own people kept their distance. Being crown prince meant being alone. He was still sitting there when the human entered. The young man looked tired but alert. He wore a simple diplomatic uniform and carried a datapad under his arm. His meal tray balanced in his other hand. He had messy black hair and kind eyes. He stopped in the doorway, looking around the nearly empty cafeteria. His eyes found Daehyun. The human paused. Daehyun waited for what always happened next. The fear. The quick turn. The rushed exit. Humans were new to galactic politics. Only 50 years of contact with other species. Most older races thought they were too naive and optimistic, too trusting. But this human did something unexpected. He walked forward, toward Daehyun. Daehyun sat up straighter, confused. The human looked so fragile up close. Soft skin, no natural armor, no claws or fangs. Humans could not even survive on Daehyun's home planet for 5 minutes without special equipment. The human stopped at his table. He smiled, a real, genuine smile. This seat taken? Dae-hyun stared at him. Was this human insane? Did he not know what Dae-hyun was? What his people had done? You are human, Dae-hyun said. His voice came out as a deep rumble that made the table vibrate slightly. That's right. My name is Ji-won. The human's smile did not waver. Do you mind if I sit? The view from here is amazing. Dae-hyun's first thought was to say no, to warn this foolish human away before he got hurt. Dae-hyun's body temperature could burn skin if someone got too close. His breath could ignite paper. He was dangerous even when trying to be careful. But how long had it been since someone smiled at him? How long since someone approached him without trembling? Sit. Dae-hyun heard himself say. Ji-won set down his tray and settled into the chair across from him. He looked out the massive window at the planet below. It was covered in blue oceans and green land, wrapped in white clouds. Beautiful, isn't it? I have been in space for 3 months now. I still cannot believe views like this are real. You are new to space travel? Dae-hyun asked carefully. Very new. This is humanity's first time at a Millennium Summit. It is a huge honor. But honestly, I am mostly here to watch and learn. My bosses do not trust me with important work yet. Ji-won laughed softly at himself. They say I am too idealistic. Not realistic enough for real diplomacy. What does idealistic mean? It means I think people can understand each other if they just talk. I believe we can find things in common, even with those who seem completely different. Ji-won took a bite of his food and made a face. Though I might be wrong about this food. Does this have any taste at all? Dae-hyun felt his mouth twitch, almost a smile. It is designed to be safe for all species, so it tastes like nothing. Well, they succeeded. This is the most bland thing I have ever eaten. Ji-won pushed the tray aside and looked at Dae-hyun with open curiosity. You are Prince Dae-hyun, right? From the Pyro's Dominion? You know who I am. Yet you still sit here. Should I not? Ji-won tilted his head. You have not told me to leave. Most species avoid me. I noticed that when you walked in earlier, everyone moved away like you were on fire. Ji-won leaned forward a little. Why do they do that? I know about the war 300 years ago, but that was your grandfather, not you. Why do they treat you like you personally hurt them? Nobody had ever asked Dae-hyun that question so directly. Most beings either ran from him or spoke to him in formal, careful words. This human just asked what he wanted to know, because they believe I will do the same things my grandfather did. I am his heir, my father's son. They think I am a weapon waiting to explode. Dae-hyun paused. They think I am a monster. Are you? The question hung in the air. Dae-hyun should have been angry, but Ji-won's voice held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. I do not know, Dae-hyun said quietly. The admission surprised him. He had never said those words out loud before. I was raised to be a conqueror, trained to lead armies, taught that strength is everything and weakness means death. But when I look at the galaxy, I see what our strength has given us. Fear, loneliness. We are the most powerful species. But we have no friends, no allies. We are strong, and we are alone. Ji-won nodded slowly. That sounds very lonely. It is. They sat quietly for a moment, both looking out at the stars. It was not an awkward silence. For the first time, in longer than he could remember, Dae-hyun felt something almost like peace. Well, Ji-won said, breaking the silence with a grin. You are not alone right now. Want to hear about the worst mistake humanity made in our first year of galactic contact? We accidentally proposed marriage to an entire planetary government because of a translation error. Dae-hyun looked at the human's cheerful face. And then something happened that had not happened in years. He laughed. It was a deep, rolling sound, like distant thunder. Somewhere in the station, security monitors probably lit up with warnings, but Jiwon just grinned wider, happy that his story was already working. They talked for hours. Jiwon told stories about Earth and humanity's clumsy first steps into galactic society. Daehyun found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. His doubts, his questions, his secret wish that his people could be more than just feared warriors. Neither of them noticed the other diplomats watching from doorways. Neither realized that their conversation was being reported to governments across the galaxy. Security cameras recorded everything. Analysts studied every word. A human was sitting with the Dragon Prince, talking with him, laughing with him. The galaxy watched and wondered what it meant. Some saw danger. Others saw opportunity. A few saw hope. But in that moment, Daehyun and Jiwon were not thinking about the galaxy. They were just two people having a conversation. Two people who had found something unexpected in each other. Understanding. Connection. The beginning of friendship. When they finally said goodnight, Daehyun walked back to his quarters feeling lighter than he had in months. Maybe years. One human had sat with him. One human had looked past the scales, and the fire, and the fear. One human had seen him as a person. It was just one small moment. One conversation in a cafeteria. Daehyun did not know it yet, but that simple act of kindness would reshape the entire galaxy. Wars would be prevented. Alliances would form. The future would bend in a new direction. All because a human named Jiwon asked a simple question. This seat taken? Morning came to the station with artificial sunlight streaming through the crystal walls. Jiwon walked toward the human delegation offices, feeling good about the previous night. He had made a new friend. It felt like a small victory. Then he saw the other diplomats staring at him. Their expressions ranged from shock to concern to outright fear. Something was wrong. Ambassador Hyun-soo stood waiting at the office door. His arms were crossed and his face looked angry. Hyun-soo was the leader of the human delegation. He had worked for 30 years to build humanity's reputation among the stars. He had gray hair and sharp eyes that saw everything. My office, right now. His voice was cold. Jiwon followed him into the small room. Hyun-soo closed the door and started pacing back and forth like a caged animal. What were you thinking? Hyun-soo demanded. Do you understand what you did? I had dinner with another diplomat, Jiwon said calmly. I thought that was why we are here. You had dinner with the Dragon Prince. The Pyrosians destroyed 14 civilizations. They killed billions. And you just walked up and sat with him like he was a school friend? He was sitting alone. Everyone was avoiding him. It seemed cruel. Hyun-soo stopped pacing and stared at Jiwon like he was looking at a stranger. Cruel? The Pyrosians nearly wiped out half the galaxy 300 years ago. They only stopped fighting because they got bored of winning. That was 300 years ago, Jiwon pointed out. Daehyun was not even alive then. Daehyun? Hyun-soo's voice went higher. You are using his first name now. He told me his name. I used it. That is just basic respect. The older man sat down heavily in his chair. He rubbed his face with both hands. Jiwon, I know you mean well. Your idealism is why we brought you on this mission. Fresh ideas and all that. But you cannot ignore reality. The Pyrosians are dangerous. Getting close to them puts all of humanity at risk. Or maybe it is an opportunity, Jiwon said quietly. Think about it, sir. We are the newest species here. Everyone thinks we are naive. But what if we could do something nobody else has done? What if we could actually talk to the Pyrosians as equals? Build a real connection? Connections can break, Hyun-soo said. And when they break with fire-breathing conquerors, people die. But he did not order Jiwon to stay away. He just warned him to be extremely careful. That afternoon, Jiwon met Daehyun in the station's arboretum. It was a huge garden filled with plants from hundreds of worlds. Each section had different temperature and atmosphere controls. Daehyun stood in an area filled with desert plants that loved heat. The temperature there made Jiwon sweat immediately. "Your people are angry with you," Daehyun said without turning around. "How did you know?" "Because my people are angry with me too." Daehyun touched a thick red leaf that looked like living flame. "My father sent a message this morning. He is not pleased that I spent time with a human. He says it makes me look weak." "Does it?" Daehyun turned to look at him. In the bright light, his scales gleamed like dark metal touched with fire. "I spent last night laughing for the first time in months. I talked to someone who did not flinch when I moved. I felt like a person instead of a weapon. If that is weakness, maybe weakness is not so terrible." They walked together through different sections of the garden. Jiwon asked questions about Pyrosian culture. Daehyun answered honestly. Not the careful diplomatic answers he gave in official meetings, but real truths. He talked about growing up in the royal palace, about the pressure to be perfect every single day, about the crushing weight of everyone's expectations. "My father wants me to be exactly like him," Daehyun said. "Strong, ruthless, feared by everyone. He looks at the galaxy and sees only enemies and resources to take. But I look at it and see so many possibilities. Different cultures, different ideas, different ways of living. I wonder what we could learn if we were not so busy making everyone afraid of us." "Why do you not tell him that?" "Because he would see it as betrayal. Betrayal of my grandfather's memory, of our people's traditions, of everything the Dominion stands for." Small flames flickered between Daehyun's fingers. "I am trapped between what I am supposed to be and what I want to be." Jiwon was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother used to say the bravest thing you can do is be yourself, even when the whole world wants you to be something else." "Your grandmother sounds very wise." She was. She also said that change is scary. But staying the same when you need to change is even scarier. Over the next several days, they kept meeting. Sometimes in the arboretum, sometimes in the observation deck. Once in the huge library, where books and data from across the galaxy were stored. They talked about everything: philosophy and history, their hopes and fears, what they wanted their futures to look like. Jiwon learned that Daehyun loved poetry, especially old verses about honor and duty. Daehyun learned that Jiwon played an earth instrument called a guitar, and that he missed rain. The other diplomats noticed. How could they not? A human and a Pyrosian spending time together like it was normal, like they were friends. Some thought it was dangerous. Others found it fascinating. A few wondered if it might be the start of something important. One of those was Soyeon. She was a counselor from the Etherian collective. The Etherians were telepaths who stayed neutral in all conflicts. They never took sides. Soyeon was tall and thin with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to look right through you. She approached Jiwon one evening after he left a meeting with Daehyun. "May I speak with you, Ambassador Jiwon?" "I am not an ambassador. Just a junior diplomat. Perhaps not for long, given what you are doing." She gestured to a quiet corner away from others. "What you have started with Prince Daehyun is dangerous. You understand that?" "Yes. Everyone keeps telling me that. They are not wrong. But they are not completely right either." Soyeon's face was hard to read. "The Pyrosians are like a wound that never healed. An old injury the galaxy has been too afraid to touch. Your friendship with the prince might be the first real attempt to heal that wound. But healing hurts. There will be people who resist, from his side and from others. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I sense something in Prince Daehyun I have never felt in a Pyrosian before. Doubt, questions, the possibility of real change. And I sense in you a genuine desire to help, not to manipulate or use him." She paused. "But be very careful. Not everyone wants this wound to heal. Some people have built their whole lives around that old injury." She walked away without explaining more. Jiwon thought about her words during the next summit session. It was a boring meeting about trade agreements and shipping routes. Most diplomats looked half asleep. Then Guman spoke up. He was a Vorton delegate. The Vortons had suffered terribly in the war with the Pyrosians. Perhaps the Dominion would like to share their thoughts on fair trade, Guman said with heavy sarcasm. Though, I suppose they only understand taking what they want by force. The room went completely silent. Everyone turned to look at Daehyun. Ji-won tensed. He had seen Daehyun get angry before. When the prince lost his temper, his body temperature rose. Small flames danced on his scales. The air around him shimmered with heat, but Daehyun stayed calm. He stood up slowly and spoke in a measured, careful voice. The Pyros Dominion recognizes that our past actions created deep distrust. We do not ask anyone to forget what happened, but we hope you might consider that a species, like a person, can choose to grow beyond its history. We would welcome opportunities to build fair trade relationships based on mutual benefit, not on force. Several diplomats looked at each other in surprise. This was not how Pyrosians normally talked. Usually they made demands, not requests. They spoke of their power, not their hopes for cooperation. Guman looked surprised too. He sat down without saying anything else. After the session ended, Ji-won caught up with Daehyun in the hallway. That was amazing. You completely changed the energy in that room. This one, I wanted to burn his scales off, Daehyun admitted quietly. Every instinct told me to respond with threats, to remind him why he should fear us. But then, I thought about what you said, about finding common ground, about talking instead of fighting. How did it feel? Hard, unnatural. Every part of my training screamed at me to show dominance. Daehyun paused. But also satisfying. More satisfying than threatening him would have been. That night, another message came from Daehyun's father. This one was much harsher. Emperor Taeyang had heard about what happened in the trade session. He was not impressed. The message was short and cutting. You shame our ancestors. A Pyrosian does not beg for acceptance from lesser beings. You will return home immediately. You need to remember your place and your duty. Daehyun stood in his quarters reading the message over and over. His hands shook. Not from fear, but from the weight of the choice he faced. He could obey. Go home. Accept his father's punishment. Become the prince everyone expected. The weapon. The conqueror. The heir to an empire built on fear and blood. Or he could refuse. Continue on this new path that Ji-won had shown him. Risk everything for a chance to be something different. He thought about the last few days. About laughing in the observation deck. About walking through the arboretum. About speaking calmly in that session without making threats and feeling good about himself afterward. He thought about what kind of emperor he wanted to be. Not what kind he was supposed to be. Daehyun wrote his reply carefully. Father, I understand your concerns, but I believe it is time for our dominion to evolve. I do not seek approval from others, but I do seek respect. I will not return home yet. My work here is not finished. He sent the message before he could change his mind. The response came back in minutes. Just 2 words. So be it. So be it. Daehyun stared at those words. His father had just cut him loose. Maybe even disowned him. The ice of rejection felt strange in his fire-born heart. Someone knocked at his door. When he opened it, Ji-won stood there holding 2 cups of steaming liquid. I heard humans drink this when things are difficult. It is called tea. I thought you might need some. How did you know something was wrong? Good guess. Ji-won offered 1 cup. Bad news from home? The worst possible. Daehyun took the cup even though the liquid was far too cool for his taste. He appreciated the gesture. I think I just destroyed my relationship with my father. For what it is worth, Ji-won said quietly, I think you are doing the right thing. You think so, but you cannot know for certain. What if I am wrong? What if this path leads nowhere? Then at least you tried. At least you chose your own path instead of walking one someone else laid out for you. Ji-won smiled. That takes more courage than any battle. Dae-hyun looked at this small, fragile human who had somehow become the most important person in his life. Why do you believe in me so much? Because you believe in yourself, even when it is hard, even when it costs you everything. That is the kind of person worth believing in. They sat together in comfortable silence, drinking terrible tea and watching stars through the window. Despite everything, despite his father's rejection and the uncertain future, Dae-hyun felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Everything changed on the 14th day of the summit. Ji-won was in his quarters, reading reports when the alarms started screaming. They were loud and sharp, echoing through every corridor of the station. His communication device buzzed with an emergency alert. All personnel were ordered to shelter in place immediately. There had been an incident in the Pyrosian delegation's quarters. Ji-won's heart sank. He ignored the shelter order and ran toward Dae-hyun's section, the hallways filled with smoke and the harsh smell of burning metal. Emergency teams rushed past him, carrying equipment. Through the gray haze, he could see real flames, not the controlled fire that Pyrosians sometimes produced, but wild, spreading flames that consumed everything. Station security stopped him before he could get closer. A guard in protective gear held up one hand. You cannot go in there. The Pyrosian guards responded with lethal force. The entire section is a combat zone. What happened? What started this? A cargo hauler crashed into their quarters. It was carrying plasma fuel containers. The Pyrosians thought it was an attack and defended themselves with everything they had. Ji-won's mind raced. A cargo hauler? That made no sense. The station had multiple safety systems to prevent exactly that kind of accident. And plasma fuel was completely harmless to Pyrosians. They used it like humans used water. Why would anyone attack them with something that could not hurt them? Unless the point was not to hurt them. Unless the point was to make them react exactly like they did. By the time the fires were under control, the damage was done. Video footage spread across the entire station within an hour. It showed Pyrosian guards unleashing massive streams of plasma fire. It showed hallways melting. It showed other delegates running in terror. It showed exactly what everyone had always feared. That the Pyrosians were dangerous monsters who would destroy everything when threatened. The Galactic Council called an emergency session immediately. Delegates filled the chamber, and their mood was ugly. Many demanded that the Pyrosian delegation be expelled from the summit. Some wanted even harsher punishment. Gyumin stood up, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. We have seen the truth today. The Pyrosians have not changed. They cannot change. They respond to every situation with violence and fire. They are a threat to every peaceful species in this galaxy. We should never have allowed them here in the first place. Other voices joined his. Species that had been neutral before now called for action against the Dominion. The mood in the chamber grew darker and more dangerous. Dae-hyun sat in his delegation's seats. His face looked like stone. He said nothing, but Ji-won could see the heat shimmer rising from his body. The prince was furious and hurt and barely holding himself together. Ambassador Hyun-soo grabbed Ji-won's arm hard. Do not even think about it. Likes Klam. Well, think about what? Whatever you are planning. The Pyrosians just destroyed any goodwill they might have built. Any connection with them now will damage humanity's reputation for decades. We need to distance ourselves immediately. Something is not right about this. Ji-won insisted. The whole thing feels wrong. It does not matter if it feels wrong. It happened. The video is real. And now, we need to protect ourselves before we get burned along with them. But Ji-won could not let it go. While the council continued debating, he slipped out and found So-yeon in a corridor outside the chamber. "You warned me that some people do not want things to change," he said without greeting. "Did you know this was going to happen?" I sensed hostility toward the prince's efforts. "I did not know it would happen like this." Her large eyes looked troubled. "But you are right to be suspicious. I have been reviewing the incident data. There are serious problems with the official story." "What kind of problems?" "The cargo hauler's flight path was remotely altered just moments before the crash. The plasma fuel shipment was not scheduled to be anywhere near that section of the station, and the vessel's identification codes were fake. So someone did this on purpose, almost certainly. Someone wanted exactly this outcome. They wanted the Pyrosians to react with overwhelming force. They wanted to destroy any progress Prince Daehyun had made toward peace." Ji-won felt cold anger settle in his chest. "Can you prove it?" "I can show you the data. But whether the council will listen is another question entirely. Many of them want to believe the worst about the Pyrosians. Evidence that challenges that belief will not be welcome. We have to try anyway." They worked together for hours, compiling evidence. Security logs showing the trajectory change. Communication records revealing the falsified identification codes. Timestamps that did not match what the official report claimed. Slowly, piece by piece, a picture emerged. Someone had deliberately crashed that hauler into the Pyrosian quarters. They had done it, knowing the Pyrosians would defend themselves aggressively. They had created the perfect trap. The question was who and why. Ji-won requested a private meeting with the council leadership. He was denied. A junior diplomat from a new species did not have that kind of access. So he decided to do something dramatic. The next day, during the open session when any delegate could speak, Ji-won stood up. "I request permission to address the council about the incident." Hyun-soo looked like he wanted to drag Ji-won bodily from the room. But once the request was made publicly, it could not be denied without a formal reason. The council chair, an elderly being named Unji, looked surprised. "The human delegation wishes to speak?" "Very well. You may proceed." Ji-won walked to the center of the chamber. Hundreds of eyes from dozens of species watched him. He could feel the weight of their attention pressing down on him. His hands wanted to shake, but he forced them to stay steady. "I understand the fear that yesterday's incident created," he began. His voice sounded small in the huge chamber. "I watched the footage just like everyone else. I saw the flames and the destruction. But I believe we have all been deceived." Angry murmurs rippled through the crowd. Guman stood up quickly. "The human defends the Pyrosians? After what they did?" "I am not defending violence," Ji-won said firmly. "I am asking for truth. The official story does not match the facts." He presented the evidence. The altered flight path. The fake codes. The impossible timing. With Soyeon's help, he displayed all the data on the chamber's main screens so everyone could see it clearly. "Someone wanted the Pyrosians to react with force," Ji-won explained. "They created a situation specifically designed to make Prince Daehyun and his people look dangerous. And it worked. We all saw what we expected to see. Violent Pyrosians. But what we should be seeing is a carefully planned attack meant to destroy any chance of peace between our peoples." The chamber fell silent. Delegates studied the data carefully. "These are very serious accusations," Unji said slowly. "Do you have proof of who was responsible?" "Not yet," Ji-won admitted. "But I know it must be someone who benefits from keeping the Pyrosians as enemies. Someone who does not want them to change or integrate peacefully." "This is completely ridiculous," Guman declared loudly. "The human is inventing wild conspiracy theories to protect his friend. We all know what really happened. The Pyrosians showed their true, violent nature." "Did they?" Soyeon's calm voice cut through the noise like a blade. The Etherian counselor stood, and her telepathic presence made everyone pay immediate attention. "I have personally verified this data. It is completely accurate. The incident was not an accident. It was sabotage." Her word carried enormous weight. The Etherians were famous across the galaxy for their neutrality and absolute honesty. If Soyan said something was true, it almost certainly was. The council chair called for a temporary recess to review all the evidence properly. During the break, Jiwan finally managed to find Daehyun. The prince stood alone in an observation area, staring out at the endless stars. "You should not have done that," Daehyun said without turning around. "You have made yourself a target now. I did what was right. Right or not, you have tied yourself to us completely. When the Pyrosians fall, you will fall with us. Then I guess we had better not fall." Jiwan moved to stand beside him. "I meant every word I said in there. Someone set you up deliberately. They are terrified of what you represent. And what do I represent? Change. The possibility that even ancient enemies can become something better. That idea terrifies some people more than any weapon ever could." Daehyun was quiet for a long time. "I wanted to burn them all. When I saw that footage, when I heard them calling us monsters again, I wanted to prove them absolutely right. I wanted to show them what real Pyrosian fury looks like, make them remember exactly why they should fear us. But you did not do that. No, because I thought of you. I thought of these past 2 weeks. I thought of what I would lose if I gave in to that rage." Daehyun finally looked at him. "You have changed me, Jiwan. I do not know yet if that is good or bad, but I know I cannot go back to what I was before I met you." Then we move forward. Together. The investigation took 2 more days. Council security forces traced the sabotage back to a small group of conspirators. At the center was Chancellor Minho from the Krathan Republic. The Krathans had lost billions in the war with the Pyrosians centuries ago. Minho's own family had been killed. His hatred was personal and burned deep, but more than personal revenge, he had built his entire political career on opposing the Pyrosians. His people's military spending, their defensive alliances, their whole strategic framework depended on the Pyrosians' remaining enemies. If the Dominion became peaceful, if they integrated into galactic society, what happened to Minho? His power? His purpose? Everything he had worked for would become meaningless. So, he had decided to make absolutely certain that peace never happened. When confronted with all the evidence, Minho did not even try to deny it. "You are all complete fools," he said to the assembled council. "You think the Pyrosians can really change? You think they will ever be anything except destroyers? This dragon prince might smile and talk sweetly about peace, but it is all a trick. A way to make you lower your defenses before they strike and kill you all. You tried to start a war based entirely on lies," Yunji said coldly. "You put this entire station and everyone on it at terrible risk. You betrayed everything the council stands for. I tried to save you from your own stupidity," Minho shot back. "Mark my words carefully. You will regret trusting them. You will regret it terribly." He was removed from his position immediately and sent back to his homeworld in disgrace. The other conspirators faced similar punishment, but the damage had been done. Trust had been shattered. Fear had been reinforced. And even though the truth came out, many delegates still looked at Daehyun with deep suspicion and worry. The day after the final hearing, Daehyun requested permission to address the full council himself. It was granted, though many delegates clearly did not want to hear what he had to say. Daehyun stood before them, 7 feet of black scales and barely contained fire, and he spoke from his heart. "My people have earned your fear, honestly. 300 years ago, we made ourselves into monsters. We proved our strength by destroying billions of lives, and we have lived with those consequences every day since. No one trusts us. No one wants us nearby. We are powerful, yes, but we are completely alone." He paused, looking around at all the different species gathered there. "I cannot change the past. I cannot bring back those who died in that terrible war. I cannot undo the damage my grandfather caused, but I can choose what kind of leader I will become, what kind of future I will build. and I choose to build something completely different from our past. Please. His voice grew stronger and more certain. This sabotage was meant to prove I cannot change. That Pyrosians will always be weapons, and nothing more. But I am still standing here. Still trying. Still believing that there is more to real strength than destruction. If even one Pyrosian can choose a different path, why cannot our entire species choose the same? The chamber was absolutely silent. Then, Jiwan, from his seat with the human delegation, began to clap. The sound echoed in the quiet space. Slowly, hesitantly, a few other delegates joined him. Not many, but some. It was a beginning. 3 days after the council hearing, a massive Pyrosian warship arrived at the station. It was dark, red, and shaped like a blade. Just seeing it made half the station nervous. The ship carried Emperor Taeyang's personal envoy with a direct message for Prince Daehyun. He was ordered to return home immediately to face judgment. Jiwan found Daehyun in his quarters, staring at the official summons displayed on a screen. The prince's scales looked darker than usual, as if the light inside him had gone out. "You do not have to go," Jiwan said from the doorway. "Yes, I do. If I hide here, I prove my father is right about me. That I am a coward who runs from consequences." Daehyun turned off the screen. "He will put me on trial before the High Lords. He will accuse me of betraying our people's traditions. And I will have to defend myself and my choices. That is not a trial. That is a trap designed to destroy you. Perhaps it is both. But it is my trap to face. I am the crown prince. I have responsibilities to my people." Daehyun looked at him directly. "My father is not completely wrong. If I want to change the Dominion, I must do it from within, not by hiding in neutral territory. Then I am coming with you." Daehyun's eyes went wide with shock. "Absolutely not. You cannot go to Ignar. Your species cannot survive there even for a few minutes. The heat alone would kill you instantly. Then I will wear protective equipment. I will bring whatever cooling systems I need." Jiwan stepped closer. "You stood up for peace here. You stood up for a better future. Someone needs to witness what happens when you face your father. Someone needs to tell the galaxy the real truth. If you come, you might never leave. My father could keep you as a hostage. Use you as a weapon against me. He could try. But I do not think he will. You said he values strength above everything, right? Facing him directly takes strength. Bringing a witness takes even more. Show him you are not afraid of the truth being seen." Daehyun was quiet for a very long time. Then he said softly, "You are the bravest person I have ever met in my entire life. Also, possibly the most foolish. I learned from the best," Jiwan said with a small smile. Ambassador Hyunsu absolutely forbade it when he found out. "You are not going to the Pyros Dominion. That is my final decision. Then I will resign from the delegation and go as a private citizen." "Jiwan, please be reasonable for once. They could kill you there. They could create an incident that leads to war between our species. You are risking absolutely everything. For what? To support a prince who might not even survive his own trial? For the chance that he does survive," Jiwan said firmly. "For the possibility that someone finally tried to bridge this terrible gap between our peoples. If I do not go, if I let Daehyun face this completely alone, then everything we have built together means nothing at all." In the end, Hyunsu could not stop him. But he made absolutely certain Jiwan understood all the risks. If something happens to you there, humanity might not be able to help you. We are too new to galactic politics, too weak militarily. The Dominion could do whatever they wanted, and we could not stop them. I know all of that. I am going anyway. The journey to Ignar took 3 full days. Jiwan spent most of it sealed inside a special environmental chamber that had been prepared for him. The Pyrosian ship's normal atmosphere would have cooked him alive in seconds. Even with all the protection, the heat pressing against the chamber walls was frighteningly intense. Daehyun visited him whenever he could. They did not talk much. There was not much left to say. Both of them knew what was coming. Both of them were afraid, though they tried hard not to show it to each other. On the third day, Ignar finally came into view through the viewing port. The planet was unlike anything Jiwon had ever imagined. Where Earth was covered in blue oceans and green forests, Ignar was all red and orange and burning gold. Massive volcanic plains stretched across entire continents. Rivers of actual molten rock flowed like water through valleys. The cities were built directly into mountains of heat-resistant black stone, glowing from within with internal fires. It was beautiful in an absolutely terrifying way. "This is my home," Daehyun said quietly, standing beside the viewing port. "This is what made us into what we are. Everything here is fire and stone and survival. We learned to exist in conditions that would instantly kill almost every other species. Is it any wonder we became so hard? That we learned to value pure strength above everything else?" They landed in the capital city, in a huge plaza directly before the Flame Court. Massive crowds of Pyrosians had gathered to see the Crown Prince return. When they saw a human walking beside him in a bulky environmental suit, the entire crowd went completely silent. Then the whispers started like wildfire. Jiwon could not understand the Pyrosian language, but he did not need translation. He could feel the weight of their stares pressing down on him. Their confusion, their anger, their disgust. A Pyrosian child, small but still larger than Jiwon, pointed at him and said something to her mother. The mother immediately pulled the child away, as if Jiwon was something dirty and dangerous. "They do not understand why you are here," Daehyun translated quietly. "Most think I have brought you as a prisoner to be executed, or perhaps as a pet to amuse the court. The idea that a human could be here as an equal, as a friend, is something they literally cannot imagine. Then let us help them imagine something new." The Flame Court was the most impressive and terrifying building Jiwon had ever seen. The floor was made of perfectly transparent crystal, with rivers of actual lava flowing underneath. The heat was absolutely overwhelming even through all his protective equipment. His suit's cooling systems worked at maximum capacity just to keep him alive. At the far end of the enormous court, sitting on a throne carved from a single piece of black volcanic stone, was Emperor Taeyang. He was massive, even compared to other Pyrosians. Easily 8 feet tall and broad as a boulder. His scales were heavily scarred from what must have been countless battles over centuries. His eyes literally glowed like small suns. When he breathed, visible flames danced between his teeth. He radiated raw power and barely controlled fury. Around his throne stood the High Lords, the military commanders and noble houses who ruled the Dominion alongside the Emperor. They all watched Daehyun, with expressions ranging from bitter disappointment to pure disgust. "My son returns at last." Taeyang's voice was like an earthquake and an avalanche combined. "And he brings a pet with him. Father, this is Jiwon, representative of humanity. He comes as a witness to these proceedings." "A witness?" Taeyang leaned forward menacingly. "We do not need witnesses from outside. This is a Pyrosian matter, concerning Pyrosian honor. If you plan to judge me for my actions at the Galactic Council, then those actions directly involved other species. They have earned the right to see how we handle our internal justice." Daehyun's voice stayed remarkably steady. "Unless you fear what an outsider might see and report?" It was a calculated and dangerous risk, directly challenging his father's courage in front of all the High Lords. But Taeyang could not refuse the challenge without appearing weak himself. "Very well. The human may stay and watch. Let him see firsthand what becomes of Pyrosians who forget their place and shame their ancestors." The trial began immediately. The formal charges were presented one by one. Daehyun had embarrassed the Dominion. By actively seeking approval from lesser species, he had responded to direct insults with mere words instead of overwhelming force. He had allowed himself to be manipulated and influenced by a human. He had placed personal friendship above the sacred honor of his people and their traditions. Each charge was supported by extensive evidence: video recordings of Daehyun's diplomatic speeches, detailed reports from other Pyrosian delegates who had witnessed his behavior, testimony from several high lords who believed the crown prince had become dangerously weak. Daehyun listened to all of it without any visible expression. But Ji-won could see the tension in every line of his body. This was not just a trial of his actions. It was an execution of everything he had tried to become. When his turn came to defend himself, Daehyun stood tall before the assembled lords and spoke clearly. "Everything you have said here is completely true. I did actively seek understanding from other species. I did choose careful words over immediate violence. I did form a deep friendship with a human. And knowing everything I know now, I would make exactly the same choices again." Shocked gasps and angry murmurs rippled through the assembled court like waves. For 300 years, we have been the single most feared species in the entire galaxy. We have won every war we ever fought. We have crushed every enemy who opposed us. And what has all that strength brought us? Isolation, stagnation, loneliness. We are incredibly powerful, but we are completely and utterly alone. Our children grow up learning only how to destroy, never how to create or build. Is that truly the only future we want? Is that really all we can ever be? He gestured toward Ji-won, standing small and vulnerable in his protective suit. This human, this so-called pet, showed me something I had never experienced before in my entire life. He showed me that fear and genuine respect are not the same thing at all. That strength can be used to protect and build, instead of only to conquer and destroy. That being the most powerful does not mean we must also be the most cruel. "Pure weakness," spat one of the High Lords, a scarred warrior. "You speak of weakness and cowardice, dressed up as virtue. No. I speak of evolution and survival. Species that cannot adapt to changing conditions eventually die out completely. If we continue exactly as we are, isolated and universally feared, eventually the entire galaxy will unite against us, not out of courage, but out of desperate necessity. They will have absolutely no choice except to destroy us before we destroy them first. Is that the legacy we want to leave to our children?" Emperor Taeyang had been silent through all of this, watching and listening. Now he rose from his throne and descended the steps toward his son. The temperature in the entire court rose sharply with his anger. Ji-won's suit started beeping urgent warnings. "You dare to lecture me about legacy? I built this empire with my own hands and claws. I maintained our strength and unity when others would have let everything crumble into weakness. And now you want to throw it all away just for the approval of species that would gleefully destroy us if they ever had the power? No, Father. I want to build something that actually lasts beyond our lifetimes. Empires built purely on fear always eventually fall and crumble. But true partnerships built on mutual respect can last forever." Taeyang stood directly face to face with his son. For a long, terrible moment, neither of them moved at all. The entire court held its collective breath. Then the emperor turned sharply toward Ji-won. "You, human, you have been completely silent through all of this. What do you have to say for yourself?" Ji-won's heart hammered so hard he could hear it in his ears. He knew instinctively that this moment mattered more than anything else, more than all his words at the council. This was the real test. He pulled off his helmet despite the immediate danger. He wanted them to see his actual face when he spoke, not just a reflective shield. The heat hit him like a physical wall. It felt like standing inside an oven. His exposed skin started burning almost immediately. But he forced himself to speak clearly and steadily. "I am not a warrior. I am not a conqueror. By your standards and measures, I am weak. But I will tell you exactly what I see when I look at your people. I see a species that has won every single battle, but is slowly losing the only war that truly matters. The war for your own future and survival. The words came faster now, racing against the heat that was slowly cooking him alive. You have conquered entire star systems, but you have become prisoners of your own fearsome reputation. No one trades with you willingly or honestly. No one shares knowledge or culture. No one trusts you even a little bit. You are the most powerful species in the galaxy, but you are completely and utterly alone. And loneliness, even for the mighty, is a slow and terrible death. His vision started to blur dangerously from the heat and pain. But he kept going, knowing he might not get another chance. Daehyun does not want to make you weak or helpless. He wants to make you far more than just living weapons. He wants your children to have real choices beyond endless war. He wants your entire species to be remembered by future generations for what you built and created, not only for what you destroyed. If that vision is weakness, then I am genuinely proud to stand weak alongside him. The last word barely made it out before Jiwon's legs gave out completely. He collapsed, his body simply unable to take any more of the killing heat. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was Daehyun's horrified face as the prince lunged forward to catch him before he hit the burning floor. When consciousness slowly returned, Jiwon found himself back inside his environmental chamber. He was surrounded by beeping medical equipment. His skin was covered in burns, but they had been professionally treated. He was alive, somehow. Daehyun sat in a chair beside him, looking absolutely exhausted. You nearly died. You incredibly foolish human. Did it work? Jiwon's voice came out as a painful rasp. My father has agreed to give me exactly 1 year. 1 full galactic year to prove that my approach can actually succeed. I must forge real alliances, establish fair trade agreements, show clearly that the Dominion can evolve and change without losing its essential strength. If I fail completely, I will be permanently exiled, and a more traditional heir will be chosen to replace me. Then we will not fail. You should go home now. Back to Earth. You have done more than enough. More than anyone could ever ask. End quote. Not a chance. You are stuck with me now. Jiwon managed a weak but genuine smile. Someone has to make sure you do not accidentally burn down any embassies during negotiations. Despite everything, despite all the pain and fear and uncertainty, Daehyun laughed. It was a tired, relieved laugh that shook his whole body. Then we face this enormous challenge together. Outside the medical chamber, hidden in shadows where he could not be seen, Emperor Taeyang stood silently watching them both. He had come personally to check on the human's condition. Though he would never admit that to anyone, Taeyang thought carefully about everything he had witnessed. A fragile being willing to burn alive for his friend's dream. A son willing to risk absolutely everything for what he believed was right. And he found himself wondering, for the first time in many years, if perhaps there might be a different kind of strength worth considering after all. 1 full year later, Jiwon stood in the same observation deck where everything had started. Through the massive windows, he watched ships from dozens of different species coming and going in peaceful streams of traffic. Among them were 3 Pyrrhosian vessels, their distinctive red hulls no longer causing panic or emergency alerts when they appeared on sensors. Remembering how different it used to be? Daehyun's familiar voice came from behind him. Jiwon turned and smiled warmly. The prince looked remarkably different than he had a year ago. Still powerful and imposing. Still 7 feet of muscle and scales, but there was a new lightness to him now. The crushing weight of isolation had been lifted from his shoulders. I was thinking about the very first time we met. Right here in this cafeteria, actually. You were sitting completely alone, and absolutely everyone was terrified of you. Now they are only slightly afraid of me. Definite progress. Daehyun joined him at the window, standing close enough that Jiwon could feel the comfortable warmth radiating from his body. The trade delegation from the Etherian Collective arrives in exactly 1 hour. 17 different species have signed formal agreements with us now. 17. A year ago, not a single one of them would even speak to us directly. It had been the hardest year of both their lives. Dae-hyun had worked tirelessly, almost without rest, to transform the Dominion's reputation across the galaxy, to prove beyond doubt that Pyrosians could be genuine partners instead of constant threats. He had personally negotiated trade deals, established cultural exchange programs, and opened diplomatic channels that had been sealed shut for centuries. Not everyone had been happy about the changes. Within the Dominion itself, traditionalists fought against every single reform. They saw Dae-hyun's new approach as complete betrayal of everything their people stood for. Several powerful High Lords had actively tried to undermine him, hoping to prove his methods would fail catastrophically. Lord Sung-ho had been the absolute worst. He commanded one of the Dominion's largest and most powerful fleets. He had openly and loudly opposed Emperor Taeyang's decision to give Dae-hyun this chance. 2 months ago, he had gone much further than just words and complaints. Ji-won remembered that terrible day with crystal clarity. He had been in a routine planning session with Dae-hyun and several human trade representatives when the emergency alert came through on all channels. A Pyrosian fleet had launched an unauthorized attack on a border colony world belonging to the Krathan Republic. The entire galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the Dominion would defend its rogue commander or condemn his actions. Dae-hyun had made his choice within minutes. He immediately gathered every loyal fleet he could trust and went after Sung-ho himself. Not to protect the rogue lord, but to stop him by any means necessary. "I still cannot fully believe you actually did that," Ji-won said quietly. "Fighting your own people to protect another species. That must have been incredibly painful." "It was absolutely necessary," Dae-hyun said firmly. "And yes, more painful than anything I have ever experienced. Those were Pyrosian ships I was ordering my forces to fire upon, Pyrosian warriors I was fighting against. But if our word means nothing, if we cannot police ourselves and our own people, then we truly deserve every bit of the galaxy's fear and hatred." The space battle had been brutal but mercifully brief. Dae-hyun's forces had disabled Sung-ho's entire fleet and arrested him before any colonists on the planet below were killed. It sent the clearest possible message to everyone watching. The Dominion was absolutely serious about real change, but it had cost them dearly. 3 Pyrosian warships were completely destroyed in the fighting. Hundreds of skilled warriors died, and Dae-hyun had been forced to watch it all happen, knowing he had personally given the orders that killed his own people. "You did what was right," Ji-won said gently. "Even when it hurt more than anything, because you taught me that doing right and doing easy are almost never the same thing." They stood together in comfortable silence for a long moment, watching the peaceful traffic outside. Over the past year, they had become far more than just friends. They were true partners in building something entirely new. Ji-won had been promoted to full ambassador, becoming the youngest in all of human history. His official job was to maintain humanity's diplomatic relationship with the Pyros Dominion. Unofficially, he was Dae-hyun's closest advisor and most trusted friend, the living bridge between the prince's vision and the galaxy's complex reality. "The council session starts in less than an hour," Dae-hyun said, checking the time. "Are you ready for this?" "As ready as I will ever be." Today was monumentally important. The Galactic Council was holding a formal vote on whether to accept the Pyros Dominion as a full member, not just as a tolerated military power everyone feared, but as a true equal partner in galactic governance and decision-making. It was everything Dae-hyun had been working toward all year. The chamber gradually filled with delegates representing hundreds of worlds and species. Ji-won sat with the human delegation, though absolutely everyone knew where his real loyalty and heart lay. Dae-hyun took his seat in the Dominion's section, surrounded by advisors who had slowly come to genuinely believe in his vision for the future. Council Chair Yoonji called the session to formal order. "We gather today to vote on a matter of truly historic significance. The Pyros Dominion has formally requested full membership in the Galactic Council. This is not a decision any of us should make lightly or quickly. She carefully reviewed the entire past year in detail. The trade agreements signed and honored. The cultural exchanges that had begun opening minds. The incident with Lord Sungho, and how the Dominion had handled it with justice instead of protection. The slow, difficult, painful transformation of a species the galaxy had feared for 3 full centuries. The question standing before us is actually quite simple. Unji continued seriously. Can we move beyond our painful past? Can we accept that even those who have caused terrible harm can genuinely choose to change? Or will we forever chain the Pyrosians to their darkest history, giving them absolutely no path forward, except continued isolation and eventual conflict? The debate began in earnest. Some delegates spoke passionately in favor of membership. They talked about the remarkable progress made, the new opportunities for cooperation, the critical importance of rewarding and encouraging positive change when it appeared. Others spoke just as passionately against it. They remembered the ancient war with painful clarity. They remembered worlds burned and civilizations destroyed. They questioned whether one single year could possibly erase 3 centuries of justified fear and trauma. Gumin, the Vortan delegate who had once publicly insulted Daehyun, stood to speak. Ji-won tensed automatically, expecting bitter opposition. I have absolutely no love for the Pyrosians, Gumin began bluntly. They killed my grandmother when I was young. They destroyed beautiful cities on my homeworld that can never be rebuilt. For most of my entire life, I have hated them with everything in me. Part of me probably always will. He paused, looking directly across the chamber at Daehyun. But I have watched Prince Daehyun closely this past year. I have seen him make genuinely difficult choices that cost him personally. I watched him turn his own fleet against Lord Sungho specifically to protect our colony world. I watched him honor every single agreement he made, even when it cost his people dearly. And I have slowly realized something important. If I cannot forgive at least a little, if I cannot move forward even one step, then I am the one still living in the past. Not him. Gumin straightened his shoulders with visible effort. The Vortons vote in favor of full membership. Not because we have forgotten what happened. We will never forget. But because we are choosing to hope for something better. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Then, Soyeon rose gracefully to her feet. The Etherian Collective votes in favor of membership. One by one, delegates from across the galaxy stood to cast their votes. Not everyone voted yes. Some species simply could not move past their fear or their grief. And that was understandable. But far more voted yes than no. Slowly, carefully, painfully. The galaxy was making a collective choice to try something new. When the final vote count was officially announced, membership had passed. It was not unanimous by any means. Nearly a third of the entire council had voted no. But it was more than enough. Daehyun stood slowly as the decision was formally announced. For just a brief moment, his usual iron control slipped completely. Ji-won could clearly see the raw emotion on his face. Relief, pride, deep gratitude, hope. Then, the prince composed himself and spoke to the assembly. The Pyros Dominion accepts this membership with genuine humility and fierce determination. We know perfectly well that trust must be earned fresh every single day. We know that some of you still fear us deeply, still doubt our intentions. That is completely understandable, given our history. We will prove ourselves truly worthy of this chance, not through more words and promises, but through consistent actions. Not just once, but again and again, for as long as it takes to heal these old wounds. He looked around the chamber at all the incredibly different species gathered there. My grandfather conquered through raw fear. My father maintained absolute power through overwhelming strength. I have chosen a completely different path for our future. I choose to build bridges of understanding instead of weapons of war. and I thank everyone here who is willing to walk across those bridges with us. After the session formally ended, delegates who had once fled from Daehyun now cautiously approached him. Some came to offer congratulations, others to discuss possibilities for future cooperation. It was still awkward and uncomfortable. The old fear had not completely vanished, but they were genuinely trying, and that mattered enormously. Jiwon watched from the side, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction settle deep in his chest. Against absolutely every odd, against 3 centuries of terrible history, they had actually succeeded. Ambassador Hyun-soo came to stand beside him. The older diplomat shook his head in genuine wonder. A year ago, I told you, this was completely impossible. That you were risking everything for nothing. You did say that, yes. I was completely wrong. You saw something the rest of us could not see. Or perhaps you were simply brave enough to try, when everyone else had already given up hope. Hyun-soo offered his hand formally. Extremely well done, Ambassador Jiwon. They shook hands firmly. Then, Hyun-soo left to mingle with other delegates, and Jiwon was alone with his thoughts and memories. Daehyun found him an hour later in the Arboretum, in the exact same section where they used to walk and talk during those early, uncertain days. Everyone wants to celebrate tonight, Daehyun said. There are parties being planned, diplomatic receptions, formal dinners, but I wanted to come here first. Why here specifically? Because this is where it really started for us. Not in the observation deck cafeteria, but here in this garden. This is where I first told you the complete truth about how lonely I was, how trapped I felt in my own life. You listened without any judgment. You helped me see clearly that I could choose a different path entirely. Daehyun sat down on one of the benches designed for heat-resistant species. Jiwon sat comfortably beside him, long since accustomed to the warmth that radiated from the prince's body. I could not have done any of this without you, Daehyun continued quietly. Every single time I doubted myself, you believed in me. Every time I wanted to give up completely, you reminded me why I had started. You changed my entire life, Jiwon. You changed my whole species' future. We changed it together. Jiwon corrected gently. I just gave you permission to be who you really wanted to be all along. Is that all? Daehyun's laugh was warm and genuine. You nearly died on Ignar defending me to my father. You risked your career, your safety, absolutely everything. For what? For a prince from a species everyone hated? For my friend, Jiwon said simply. For someone who deserved a real chance to prove he was far more than his history. For the possibility that the galaxy could become better than its deepest fears. They sat together peacefully in the garden, surrounded by plants from 100 different worlds, watching the station's artificial sun move slowly across the curved sky. Outside, the galaxy was actively changing. Inside, 2 friends enjoyed a moment of hard-earned peace. Years passed quickly. The changes continued and deepened. Pyrosian scholars traveled to study at universities across dozens of worlds. Other species visited Ignar, protected by advanced environmental technology, and discovered that the Dominion was far more than just warriors. Cultural exchanges brought Pyrosian art and music to planets that had never imagined such beauty could exist. There were setbacks, of course. Old hatreds built over centuries did not disappear overnight. Some Pyrosians rejected Daehyun's reforms completely and left the Dominion. Some species never fully accepted them. But the overall trend was undeniable. The galaxy was healing, slowly but surely. Emperor Taeyong eventually stepped down from power, formally naming Daehyun as his successor. The old emperor had seen enough real change to believe his son's path was the right one, even if he did not fully understand all of it. Emperor Daehyun ruled completely differently than any Pyrosian leader before him in history. He used their strength to protect the weak, not to conquer them. He built lasting alliances instead of demanding tribute. He made the Dominion into a cornerstone of galactic stability and peace, And through absolutely everything, Ambassador Jiwan remained at his side. He grew visibly older, his black hair turning silver and then white. But his friendship with the Emperor never wavered even slightly. They still met regularly in that same arboretum. Still talked about philosophy and impossible dreams. Still reminded each other why they had started this incredible journey together. Jiwan eventually wrote a book about his experiences. It became required reading in diplomatic academies across the entire galaxy. The title was beautifully simple: Sitting with Monsters. How one conversation changed everything. Decades later, in that same observation deck cafeteria where their story had begun, an elderly Jiwan and a mature Daehyun shared another meal together. They were both much older now. Jiwan moved more slowly, his hair completely white. Daehyun's scales had dulled slightly with age, but his golden eyes still held their inner fire. "Do you ever think about that very first day?" Jiwan asked, smiling at the precious memory. "Every single day," Daehyun replied honestly. "You walked over to the most feared being in the entire galaxy and asked if the seat was taken. You had absolutely no idea what you were starting. Neither did you." They looked out the familiar window at the ships passing peacefully by. Pyrosian vessels traveled freely among them now, indistinguishable from any other species, except for their distinctive design. Children who had grown up in this new era did not understand why their grandparents had ever feared them so much. "We actually did it," Jiwan said softly, still amazed. "We genuinely changed the galaxy." "You changed it," Daehyun corrected. "I just followed your brave example." "No, we changed it together." That is what real friendship means. Outside, a new generation of diplomats worked in the council chambers. Young Pyrosians, and young humans, and young members of every species, cooperating naturally as if it had always been this way. They did not know how hard it had been. They did not know the price that was paid, but Jiwan and Daehyun knew. They remembered every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt, and they knew it had all been worth it. "Thank you," Daehyun said suddenly, "for sitting with me that day, for seeing past the monster everyone else saw, for believing I could be better." Jiwan reached across the table and gently patted Daehyun's massive hand. "No longer afraid of the heat. Thank you for proving everyone wrong. For being brave enough to change, for showing the galaxy that even the deepest divides can be crossed." They finished their meal in comfortable silence, two old friends who had shaped history together. When they finally stood to leave, they walked side by side through the station corridors. Diplomats from every species nodded respectfully as they passed. The human and the Pyrosian. The bridge builder and the reformer. The two beings who had proven that peace was not just the absence of war, but the presence of courage. Their legacy would endure long after they were gone. In the trade routes connecting worlds. In the alliances protecting the weak. In the children who grew up never knowing that hate had once seemed stronger than hope. It had all started with one simple question. "This seat taken?" And the answer that changed everything. "Sit,"